With the COVID-19 pandemic, we're living in an increasingly globalized world. Before, we were competing with outsourced teams a little bit, but now with the advent of remote work that completely skyrocketed as a result of the pandemic, we're competing with outsourced teams in the Philippines and Eastern Europe and in India. But we're also competing nationally across remote teams, people who are getting hired remotely nationwide. So that means we're competing in a more competitive marketplace globally. This could possibly sound very overwhelming to you, but there is a way that we can stand out. In January 2018, I went and visited New York City. It was a great trip. I stayed at a hostel. So in the hostel, it was a very global audience in the sense that there was this girl who's studying to be a doctor from New Delhi. There was a software developer from southern India in a place called Kerala, and I met a Hungarian dude. There was an Italian. There were three Italian people staying at the hostel at the time. So with that being said, this group of people, we went on a tour of New York City, and over a day-long tour, and it was like 12 hours long. We ended up visiting Ground Zero. And the two Americans on the tour, there were only two Americans on the tour. I'd say there was probably 15 people on the tour. 13 people were of an international audience. And when we showed up to Ground Zero, and the guy leading the tour, he was 81 at the time. He's probably 84 now. A guy named Jerry. He was telling us about the story of 9/11, 2001, and myself and the other American, we actually started weeping. Like I personally got very upset as the story of 9/11 started being told, because it was a personal one. And what was interesting was that only me and the other American were crying. The other people in the audience, they were like, I mean, it's sad, but it wasn't personal for them. Everybody in America, we all remember that day. Like, for example, I was in 6th grade. I was walking into math class. And I'm telling this story because those 3,000 people that died that day, it's personal for Americans. And it was a faraway event to that international audience. With that being said, the way that we can compete globally is through leveraging local context. The last two clients that I've had at my company, they both said, I love the fact that you're in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. My two clients are in Jacksonville, Florida. And it was a huge upsell for them. Like, it was a huge benefit, the fact that they could just come to my office and see me, or the fact that I was local. That local context was the game changer. So the way that we compete in a global marketplace is by attending local meetups, attending local networking events. The edge that you can have in an increasingly competitive global marketplace is by leveraging human contact. People that you know, people that you've met, people want to do business with other businesses where they can actually look somebody in the eye and shake their hands. So I mentioned that story about visiting New York City and the context of being in America on 9/11, and when we suffered that national blow. I mean, 3,000 people dying is tragic, but there are much more greater tragedies in human history. But the story of that context is the story of how we can compete in a global marketplace. We compete by having local context.